What's going on everyone, it's Aaron from WyldeBeats, and today I'm going to be showing you how you mix your beat in 20 minutes. So I'm going to be using Studio One for this tutorial, but if you're using any other DAW, any program, all of these tips are easily transferable to any of them. So let's go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check our audio levels to make sure that our audio levels are not too hot and they're not too quiet either. So let's take a listen. Okay, so as we can see over here, the audio levels are quite hot at the moment, so we're going to bring that down just a little bit. And so I like to make that sit around -8 to -6, somewhere around there is a good start to start mixing. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and high pass everything that doesn't need low end information that may be muddying up the bass area. Okay, so I've gone through and quickly high passed everything that doesn't need anything below 200. So now I'm just going to go through and actually adjust the faders to achieve a better balance between the instruments themselves across the entire mix. This is where you should spend the majority of your time, and if you get this right, then 90% of your mixing work is already done. Okay, so I started off with the drums there and just went for a quick overall balance between them. The hi-hats was really present and really in your face, so I kind of lowered that because I want the 808 to drive the track. And you've got to keep in mind that most speakers are adjusted so the high end is enhanced and the bass is not so enhanced. So by making your tracks a little bit on the bassy side, especially in this genre, it's going to aid you in making sure that your bass comes through on weaker speakers. Okay, so that seems pretty good. We've got a good overall balance going on over the entire mix just with faders. And one thing that I do to double check that once I've done the actual balancing is to go to FabFilter Pro Q's Analyzer and just check that everything is sort of peaking around the same levels to make sure there's nothing really poking out and nothing standing out in the mix at this point. So now I'm just going to apply a very basic compression to the guitar's bus track overall. The reason for this is because if somebody is plucking away at the guitar expressively, you're going to get quite a few peaks in the melody itself, and what we want to do is just control those peaks just a tiny bit. We don't want to take away the expressiveness and the playability that someone's giving the recording. Instead, we just want to control it a tiny amount. So I'm going to be using CLA 2A from Waves. Let's go. Okay, so somewhere around there sounding pretty good. We've managed to achieve some control over the guitar melody itself, but it still sounds really nice and expressive and playable. So you just have to ask yourself the question when you're wanting to compress if you really need compression. If you don't need compression, it's better to leave your instruments as they are. So now I'm just going to set up a quick reverb for this brass here because it sounds pretty dry. So essentially we just want a bit of room tone to that to bring it a bit to life. What you have to do is with a reverb, make sure you don't overdo it, because if you overdo it, you're going to drown out the sound and it's going to become very muddy. And one thing that really helps with this is if you roll off the high end and the low end of the reverb by applying a EQ after the reverb itself. I'm going to set that up right now, so let's have a look. Okay, so somewhere around there sounding pretty good. If I just solo that quickly, I'll bypass it so you can hear the difference. Overall, I'm quite happy with this mix and how it's sounding already. So that's all the processing I'm going to apply to the individual instruments themselves. Now I'm going to move on to the mastering chain, and I'm going to start this off with SSL Comp. And SSL Comp is a really great plugin for adding a bit of glue to your track and overall just making it sound a bit finished. One thing to note is that you're better off not using a preset and actually learning the controls yourself, because it's really not that hard to understand. All you have to do is focus on your attack being quite long if you're mastering. Then you want your ratio to be quite low, because we only want it to touch the compression. We don't want it to overdo the compression. And then we want to put the release on auto, and we want to put the makeup to 0. And then we want to play around with the threshold so that the needle is just moving with the beat. So I'm going to do that now, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, that's sounding pretty good, and you can see that the needle just moves with the beat, and that's all we want to do. You don't want to like audibly hear this too much, because if you do, you're going to end up with an over processed sound. So all it does is it kind of just gels things together slightly, and then we move on to the next process. And mastering is all about that. It's making a bunch of little processes, subtle processes, work together. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on to PugTech EQP1A. What this is really good for is adding a bit of high-end sheen or low-end to your track if it's lacking in those areas. So I'm going to add a bit of high-end sheen to this track and bring out the highs just a little bit. And hopefully you can hear how that actually just brings out those highs that seem a bit faded, and now they seem like they're not necessarily in your face, but a bit more just brought to life and overall have sheen to them. So the next process in the mastering chain is called Kramer tape, also from Waves, and this is great for adding further glue and warmth to your track. So the controls you need to worry about is record level and flux, and all we're going to do is adjust those controls, leave everything else the way it is, and get a good sound out of it. Okay, so that's also sounding pretty good. Hopefully you can hear how it adds just a bit of warmth to the low end and overall makes the track just seem a bit more gelled together. The next process is also one of my favorite plugins for adding low-end oomph to a track that is lacking in the bass region. So all this does is it generates higher frequencies in the bass. So it takes your original bass and then generates higher frequencies based on your original bass, so that your bass can sound more present in the mix. So I'm just going to demonstrate this quickly. All you need to do is worry about the frequency of the bass and the max bass itself. So the next plugin we have in the mastering chain is the Oxford Inflator. What this plugin does is essentially just brings up the overall perceived volume of your track and makes it sound like it has more energy and more life. So I'm just going to quickly demonstrate this now. Let's take a look. Okay, and then the last plugin we're going to use before a limiter is actually a spatial enhancer or a image enhancer, and that is called Waves Center. So all we got to do and all we got to focus on is the sides over here, and all we have to do is bring up the level, and we're just going to hear the effect of how instantly it makes your track sound wider. So it's important to note you don't want to overdo this, because if you do overdo this, you're going to lose the center of your stereo image, and we don't want that either. So all you want to do is just widen it enough to start hearing the effect, and then maybe roll it off by about 5%. Okay, so that's sounding pretty good, and this is overall my entire mix. This is before I put a limiter on it. This is how I deliver my beats at this stage, so I don't let it peak past -4 dB at maximum. That's how I deliver my beats that I sell, and what that does is give the artist enough headroom to actually record on your beats or instrumentals or whatever. What I do for streaming purposes is now I just throw on a limiter, and my limiter of choice is the FabFilter Pro L. And a great way to start is to go to the preset section, and I'm going to select the Hip Hop Made for Beats Extra Wide preset to start. Then I'm going to make sure my output is to -0.1, and then I'm going to start bringing up the gain. Okay, now that's my beat ready to upload to YouTube and to put onto BeatStars and sell the beat itself. One thing I like to do, and it's a final check thing, is to put an analyzer after every effect that I have in my mastering chain and just check that everything is looking balanced. Yep, everything's looking good. So that wraps up this mixing tutorial. I hope it helps a lot of you. I've got a lot more content coming in future, so subscribe for more, give this a like, and show some love. Peace.